Hello everyone and welcome back to the Commander's Forge. My name is Andy Bentley and the Forge is an area for me to talk about magic, Commander, and anything else while we try and drag this whole mental health thing back out of the gutter. So this weekend I went to the pre-release for Aether Drift and it was the lowest number of people I've seen at a Friday night pre-release. So my LGS does Two-Headed Giant Friday night pre-release, and I always go with my cousin. And there's usually a decent turnout, somewhere around 30-ish people, maybe up to 60 if it's like a really exciting set that people are looking forward to. Like, I'm pretty sure Bloomhallow or Bloomhaven, the one I'm talking about, you know what it is. We had 32 teams, which is 64 players. There was not that many for this one. So it was me and my cousin. Then there was 3 other teams, and then a 4th other team that actually dropped after they saw how many teams there were. So we essentially played every other team once. Yeah, it was just really weird. So normally when my LGS does pre-release, they have on Friday nights for Friday Night Magic, they do 2 different commanders. They do an early commander at 6:30, and then they do commander at 8:30 for the late crowd. Normally on pre-release night, there is no 8:30 commander. They just do the pre-release. They didn't do that this time, so they still had their late commander and then pre-release on top of that, and I think their numbers severely suffered because of that. But that's it. We still had fun with it. It was the first pre-release in the last 4 or 5 that me and my cousin just had bad draws. Like, we were both happy with our decks and they just didn't perform. So we ended up out of 3 rounds winning 1, but we still had fun. And I think it was the earliest I've ever been home from a pre-release. Normally I think pre-release starts at 9 p.m. You get about an hour to build. That brings us to the first round around 10. 9 times out of 10, people go to turns. So after you've played 4 rounds, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, 12 to 1, 1 to 2. But then you tack on the extra time from turns, and we could be getting out of there at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And then, it takes me an hour and change to get home. And I was home by 2 o'clock this time. Am I overly disappointed in the set? Not so much. I think there's a lot of fun stuff in it. I don't think a lot of people are super gung-ho about the number of vehicles and mounts in the set. I will say there's one possibility for a commander that I actually kind of want to pick up and build, and that's the blue-green god, because I feel like I could do some fun stuff with her. But then I feel like a lot of other people are going to see the same things I see when I look at her, and I feel like I'm going to build it, and then it's going to get boring because everyone else is going to see that commander get built that way. So I'm holding off on picking that up for right now. Now, I will say the new Samet is also pretty fun. Mostly because, she just kind of does what I would like the speed stuff to do, which is reducing costs and making my things hit harder. But that's kind of it for the pre-release. We still had a good time. It was just kind of underwhelming. Yeah, I think that's about all I have to say about it. Anyway, when we come back, we're going to talk about a deck that I used to have together, I took apart, I put back together, I took apart, and now I'm putting it back together. And we'll see if it sticks this time. But I'll be right back. And we're back. Now, I, in the past, did build Krenko Mob Boss. And this was back very early in my getting into Commander. And it really wasn't that good of a deck, but my playgroup was also at a level that it was better than what they were playing. And so it kind of fell into this, it's too powerful for what I'm doing at home, but it's not powerful enough to take out into public. I ended up taking it apart, and then like a year or two later, I tried putting it back together with some new stuff, and then I ended up taking it apart, and I'm ready to try putting it back together. So, the commander of the deck is still going to be Krenko Mob Boss, which is 2 red for a 3/3 Goblin Warrior. You can tap him to put X 1/1 red Goblin creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is the number of goblins you control. That said, I did have other options. There is a stack of other legendary goblins in the deck that could be the commander, but for now we're going to stick with Krenko. Those others include Kiki-Jiki the Mirror Breaker, which is 2 red for a 2/2 Goblin Shaman with haste. You can tap him to put a token that's a copy of a target non-legendary creature you control onto the battlefield. Token gains haste, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. The main thing he's here to do is to make token copies of our lords to help pump the team a little more. And yeah, that's kind of it. Although we do have things like Goblin Recruiter and stuff like that we wouldn't mind making a copy of to get their ability again. Next up, we have Goro, Disciple of Ryusei. It's a 1 and a red for a 2/2 Goblin Samurai. It has 4 red. Creatures you control gain haste until end of turn. That is the main reason it's in here. But it does also say for 3 red, create a 5/5 red dragon spirit creature token with flying. Activate only if you control an attacking modified creature. Moving right along, we have Grunzo, Havoc Razor. It is red for a 2/2 Goblin Rogue. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, choose one. Either goad a creature that player controls, or exile the top card of that player's library till end of turn. You may cast that card, and you may spend mana as though or mana of any color to cast that spell. So yeah, he's really in here just to help get us things off of our opponent's libraries. You know, in mono red there isn't like a ton of great ways to like ramp and stuff. So, yeah, that's why he's in here. Next up, we have Muxus, Goblin Grandy, 4 red for a 4/4 Goblin Noble. When he enters the battlefield, reveal the top 6 cards of your library. Put all Goblin creature cards with converted mana cost 5 or less from among them onto the battlefield, and the rest onto the bottom of your library in a random order. Whenever Muxus attacks, it gets +1/+1 till end of turn for each other Goblin you control. I don't think I really need to explain that one, so I'm just going to move on. Next up, we have the other Krenko that's not the last Krenko. So that's Krenko Tin Street Kingpin. 2 and a red for a 1/2 Goblin. Whenever he attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on him, then create a number of 1/1 red Goblin creature tokens equal to its power. So in a deck like this, he's just another way to make more tokens. He also doesn't care about making them equal to the number of counters on him, so as long as we have a couple of lords, you attack with Krenko, you end up making 4 or 5 guys. It's... yeah, that's about all there is to it. Next up, we have Pashillik Mons, which is 2 and a red for a 2/2 Goblin Warrior. Whenever Pashillik Mons or another goblin you control dies, It deals 1 damage to any target. You can pay 3 in a red to sacrifice a goblin to make 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. So she's really just in here to be a mana sink to start sacking goblin tokens when, we're at a point of attrition where we can't get through, they can't get through, we just start dumping mana into doing direct damage. Speaking of direct damage, the last legendary creature in this deck was for a long time in the running to take Krenko's spot, but I decided to stick with Krenko. That's General Crete the Boltbringer. 2 and a red for a 2/2 goblin soldier. Whenever 1 or more goblins you control attack, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token that's tapped and attacking. Whenever another creature you control enters, General Crete the Boltbringer deals 1 damage to each opponent. So, part of the reason this ended up not being the Commenda is because Krenko just pumps out more tokens, and this is better in the 99 for when you play Krenko and you make 5 or 6 tokens and then you just start machine gunning their life totals. Now, moving into the other cards in the 99, I don't necessarily want to talk about every goblin that's going into this deck because there's almost 40 of them. I will bring up some of the more important ones to what the deck is trying to do, and I think I can narrow that down to about 10 cards. The important 10. First up on that list is Skirk Prospector. Single red for a 1/1 goblin. It says sack a goblin, add red. A, it's a sack outlet. B, it makes mana. C, that's very good. Next up, we have the Goblin Shurgen, which is a single red for a 0/2 goblin. And it says, for 0, sacrifice a goblin to regenerate target creature. I don't think I really need to say why this is good, particularly when Krenko is going to start pumping out a bunch of tokens. You can protect your important cards by sacrificing tokens. The next two kind of go hand in hand, but the first one is Goblin Matron. 2 and a red for a 1/1 goblin. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for a goblin card, reveal that card, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. The next one is slightly better. Goblin Recruiter, 1 and a red, for a 1/1 goblin. When it comes into play, search your library for any number of goblin cards you choose, reveal those cards, shuffle your library, put them on top in an order you choose. This is very good if we have Muxus in hand, just for reasons. Next up we have, what I call the Lords. First up, we have the Bloodmark Mentor. 1 in red for a 1/1 Goblin Warrior. Red creatures you control have first strike. Next up, we have the Caterwauling Boggart, which is 3 in red for a 2/2 Goblin Shaman. It essentially says each goblin you control has menace, and each elemental you control has menace. It's formatted in the old way because this is from Lorwyn, but you catch my drift. Next up, we have the Legion Loyalist. Single red mana for a 1/1 Goblin Soldier with haste, but it has Battalion. Whenever Legion Loyalist and at least 2 other creatures attack, creatures you control gain first strike and trample till end of turn and can't be blocked by creature tokens this turn. And next up we have the 3 levels of goblins. So first up we have Goblin Chieftain, which is 1 red for a 2/2 goblin with haste. Other goblin creatures you control get +1/+1 and have haste. Next, we have the Goblin War Chief, which is 1 red for a 2/2 goblin. Goblin spells cost 1 less to cast, and goblin creatures you control have haste. And then we have the Goblin King, which is 1 red for a 2/2 Goblin Lord. I think this one might be errated, but I have the older one. It says all goblins get +1/+1 and have Mountain Walk. I think the new one might say other goblins you control, but I'll have to double check that. Alright, and we have 2 more to round out our lords. The first one is Goblin Trashmaster. 2 red for a 3/3 Goblin Warrior. Other goblins you control get +1/+1, and you can sacrifice a goblin to destroy an artifact. And finally, we have the Dropkick Bomber. 2 and a red for a 2/3 goblin warrior. Other goblins you control get +1/+1, and you can pay a red till end of turn. Another target goblin you control gains flying, and when this creature deals combat damage, sacrifice it. That brings me to the last little bit of things I want to talk about. I mean, it's not a goblin deck without including Perforos, God of the Forge. It is the one non-goblin in the deck. 3 in a red for a 6/5 god, indestructible. As long as your devotion to red is less than 5, Perforos isn't a creature. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Perforos deals 2 damage to each opponent, and you can pay 2 in a red to give creatures you control +1/+0 till end of turn. Again, it's not a Krenko deck without a Perforos in it. Next up, we have the Boggart Shenanigans, which is 2 in a red for a tribal enchantment goblin. Whenever another goblin you control is put into a graveyard from play, you may have Boggart Shenanigans deal 1 damage to target player. In the same vein as that, we have Goblin Bombardment. 1 in a red for an enchantment, sacrifice a creature. Goblin Bombardment deals 1 damage to target creature or player. And finally, we're going to round it out with Impact Tremors, which is Perforos, but as just an enchantment. 1 in a red for an enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, Impact Tremors deals 1 damage to each opponent. And there is more to the deck, but it's goblins. And I don't really think there's much more I need to go into that for you to understand. It's just going to do the thing that Mono Red Goblins does. So I think for now, I'm going to call that good. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. All of my links can be found in my link tree in the description below. I would like to thank Ian Foss and Cody Mulpey of the band The Crypt for allowing me to use music for my opening and ending, along with Nate and Erica Jacobs for making my original logo. And I would also like to thank Christina McNichol for creating my new logo. And I'll see you next time.